Hello everyone, I'm Pan. I'm an exchange student from Thailand, and yes, today I'm really grateful for the opportunity to introduce the guest speaker. So, okay. So I think this guest speaker actually represent what we all aspire to become. He's actually already shaped the AI world from both the startup perspective and also from the enterprise perspective. And I think what truly what make these stories powerful for us is actually he start exactly where we are as a Cal grads, doing computer science and entrepreneurship. He also have a very astonishing career, which also tell us that there's not always like just one path of you to choose from. You can always hop from research to doing startup to doing enterprise, and that is totally fine. His journeys also reflects a lot on how what we actually talk about in class, like about our execution and the courage to actually build the startups. So, he also founded Boss, which is a search platform that scaled to over 1 billion query per month. Later, he also co-founded Infer, which raised over 40 million USD in venture capital before its acquisitions. And if that were not enough, he also recognized as MIT Technology Review Top 35 Innovators. So with that, please all join me and giving him a very warm Berkeley welcome to Vik Singh.
Vic, probably you would say this too. What do you think the hardest thing is to do as a student?
Oh, the test.
I think it's introducing a speaker like you.
Oh, no, that was a very kind introduction. So thank you. And it's nice to be back. It's a bit surreal actually to be here. I remember being a student in this class when I was an undergrad, sitting somewhere probably in the back and listening to speakers. So hopefully you all can find this useful.
Who do you remember? Do you remember anybody who you were?
That's a good question. This was when Richard Newton was here. And I remember there was, I think it was PayPal. I think we had, if it was in this class or it was a breakout room, Peter Thiel had come.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that was, I remember a lot from that conversation, I'll say. He definitely dropped some knowledge in that meeting, so it was very
that's
useful.
not what I was thinking you were going to say he dropped. It was knowledge.
There was, or contrarian thinking, I'll say. So.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, and I know it's not in our script, and I just, I can't help but go off script just a little bit. But you are, so you were here about 10 years ago with Rosmic as a part of a founders panel that we had done. And that was when you were in the middle of founding Infer and starting your family. I mean, it was a typical startup journey in a way. It was kind of crazy. But you've always been super kind. And so I think it's interesting that you talk about Peter Thiel, because I don't think that's one of the first three words you hear about when you think about him. But I have this feeling like you take something from everybody you hear. And I'm just curious, from that time when you were taking the entrepreneurship classes, is there anything that you thought about that you still refer to now?
I think it's hard to go. I mean, it was like 20 plus years ago.
I know.
Being here.
I know, but I really know that you have a good memory also.
I think it was more the thing I took away. I remember it was John Bergstone who was here.
He did the first class.
He did the first. I was in his first class. I was a freshman. I was like first semester here, and he was offering like an upper division class. I think it was like IUR 171.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is the only class that Berkeley offers that has anything that mentions startups or entrepreneurship. And I was very interested in doing that. And so I emailed him and asked him if I can be a part of the class, because I didn't have any of the lower division requirements fulfilled by that point. And he let me into the class. So I was probably the youngest in the class. And I really just, I don't really remember specific points, but I just remember like just seeing someone, like John, for example, gone through it, and then him bringing people who had gone through that experience. It just normalized it.
Yeah.
And that sort of creates a confidence.
Yeah.
So that, oh, these people did it. Like, I think I could do it too. And there's other people in the class who want to do the same thing. So it was just infectious.
Last semester, John Tien joined us, and I think he was in your class also, possibly.
Okay.
I don't know. He's CPO for COM. I don't know anything about your family background, but on the surface, I'd be like, entrepreneurship, really? In the early 2000s? Why did you have what was it about it that made you interested in that?
I think when I was young, my dad always talked about, I was born and raised in the Bay Area and in Silicon Valley. So you just hear about these these amazing startup stories, and so I think he kind of instilled in me that kind of that inception in my head, to go and try to do something at some point. And so I decided when I graduated from Berkeley, I didn't end up doing a startup right then and there. I didn't feel like I was ready. I didn't really have a network. I didn't really know enough people. I didn't have enough of a good idea. So I was like, okay, I'm going to continue working in the larger companies. I had done some internships in the past at larger companies. And when I was at Yahoo, Yahoo had acquired a company called Bix.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a person named Mike Spicer who had joined in that acquisition. And then he and I got to know each other. And then he ended up leaving Yahoo and he joined Sutter Hill Ventures, which is one of the ones up here.
Yeah.
And then he became a partner there. And then he had convinced me to come to Sutter Hill and be an EIR there. And that was it felt like a de-risked way of doing the startup dream. I could basically be in a space where you still get a salary, you get to see other startups, you could take your time and then come up with an idea and then go and build it. So I thought this was perfect. I can go ahead and do that. And so that was the space I did it in, but it was fairly de-risked. At least I felt for myself, to go figure it out. And that ended up being a good place to do it because I can go and use the firm's name and the business card to go meet with people. And I got to meet with Ben Horowitz. I got to go meet with all these various top VCs. And then I was able to convince my co-founders or my future co-founders to come join me, who were both Berkeley folks. And so we started a company and then, and once you start it, then you don't really look back. There is no turning back.
So we tell the students a lot, look right, look left. We have this connection period for the first 10 unofficial minutes of class, because this is where you're going to find your founders. I mean, again, I feel somewhat guilty for not going on script, but it's so interesting because these guys are in these seats right now. Do you remember how you found those guys? I mean, were you living together? What was it?
No, it was actually... So it's a funny story. I'm going to go off way script. I don't know where we're on the script. I won't tell. So when I was a freshman at Berkeley, I remember someone had come. There was some type of career or just some talk from someone from Microsoft. So someone from Microsoft came and gave a talk. And then a whole bunch of people afterwards came up and they were getting these forms to fill out to basically apply for an internship. And so then I got this form and I filled it out and I submitted it. And then it was asking what year I was going to graduate from. And I just happened to skip that question and then submitted it. And then I think they reached out to me and I went through the rounds and it went great. It was also very scary because I didn't know half the stuff they wanted to interview on. I had to study and cram stuff. And then I got a call from the recruiter asking me, "Oh, hey, we're really interested in moving forward with you. What year did you graduate from? Or are you going to graduate?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to graduate this year." And he's like, "Oh, you're a freshman." And it's like, "Okay, well, we're really focusing on juniors and seniors because we want to pipeline them into full-time jobs. So, let me get back to you on this." And so then she went and then she called me back and she's like, "So I'm sorry, we're gonna pass, but we'll put you in the top of the hopefully sophomore we can make an exception for you." Blah, blah, blah. And I remember feeling super bummed. I think it was after some CS lab I'd finished. I come back late to the dorm and then I was just thinking, I was like, oh man, I was this close. I had passed it on merit, and then because of the year I was graduating, I was like, they said no. I'm like, this kind of stinks. So then I think so I was bummed for the whole day, and then I think I don't know, at 1 a.m. I decided to I don't know, send this email to the recruiter, and I send this email and I it's a little bit embarrassing. It's very cringe to read it, but I was basically saying how either take me now because my passion can't be any higher than it is now.
You basically gave them an exploding offer, right?
Well, I said something that was, it was like, take me out or forever, like, or hold your peace, and I'm gonna go somewhere else. I don't know. I was like, I don't know, saying something, and then I send it, but then right when I'm about to send it, I go and I CC Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer on it. I go and I send it, and I go to sleep, and then I think the next day, I don't know.
Like, just in case, does anybody not know who Steve Ballmer or Bill Gates are? All right, good. Don't identify if you don't.
Yeah,
that's nuts.
Yeah, it was a little bit emotional.
Is that the cringy part?
No, the email is much more cringe. Oh. Yeah. But anyways, I sent it, and then I think it was next day. I get a response like, okay, let me follow up and I'll call you back. And then she calls me back saying, hey, you got it. And so then I was like, great. Like, I was super excited. I was like pumped. And so one of the things they do,
that is risky.
Well, I mean, it had nothing really to lose if you think about it. It's just more of like, it's a little bit embarrassing. But like the upside is like huge. If they say no, I just got no twice. It's not a big deal. Like, I can still apply again next year, but me not trying would be the worst thing, And so
I think that's a huge learning, and you're giving the opportunity for students also to share their extraordinary projects with you, which we haven't had anybody actually do that. So I sent an email over the rainy weekend, and we'll have a code here so that students can share projects. And Shiloh is also here in case people want to afterwards get some more information on Microsoft. So I like how you're doing that. Are there any freshmen here today? There you go. I challenge you all.
It was funny. We had interns in our team from at Microsoft. And I was telling, they were asking about this, and I told them the story. And then I started getting these passionate emails from the interns about getting offers for full time. I'm like, okay, I have to, I have to do service to this, So, but one of the reasons why that was important was because one of the things that they did is they got all the interns who were going to go to Microsoft that summer together for a dinner.
Thank you.
And it was at La Med on, I think, is it still here?
I don't think so. La Med, is it? And it's here.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't go there.
Yeah, it's a nice restaurant. And so we went there. They got a long table with all of us there. And then, so I was chatting with folks there, and there was like two on maybe more quieter folks who were at the table. And then, I was chatting with them, and I was listening to their answers, and I was like, wow, they're really smart. Like, and they're like juniors, and like they're so smart. And so then when I went during the summer to up in Redmond to go to Microsoft, I almost felt like I was coming from behind, right? Because like, here's everyone's like juniors and seniors. I'm here, I'm a freshman. I'm just for the first time taking CS classes. Like, I kind of felt like I was behind. So I was always studying and reading and building stuff. And one of the good things I did was I basically stalked those two folks, like one of the two smartest people at the table, but maybe even the two smartest people I've ever worked with. I just stalked them everywhere. They were like wondering who I was, and I just followed them everywhere, and we just kind of were inseparable during the summer. And I learned a lot from them, and we got close. And then they eventually were, the co-founders I called up to, build a company with. And so it started there.
That's a fantastic story. Plus, it's the quietest people. Like, make sure you're looking at people to be on your team, or sometimes the quietest people. Now I'm looking through my notes. I'm like, all right, journey. So you've talked a little bit about your time at Cal, and I want to make sure that we have time to talk about Infer, and we have time to talk especially about what you're doing at Microsoft, because it impacts next level innovation. But if you had to go back, and I don't think your family is here. Is your son here by chance?
They're over there, yeah. But I met my wife in Berkeley too, so
I
met my
love
co-founders.
it.
I met my wife. I have a lot to
wait,
thank.
Hold on, your wife you didn't stalk though, right?
I don't think so, but she might think I did. So
no,
that's
she's saying no. I love that, because I think your son was 3. How old are you now? 11. Do you think you were like 1, 2?
It was 1.5.
You were like the best. You really were the best behaved child. I had kids that were like 6 years older who were horrible. My own children, but so, what is your son's name?
Mohan, and I have another one, Shreyan, who's 8. So,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
If you were to tell Mohan, if he was like getting ready to, get into college and do work, and was a bit older than he is now, what would you tell him to think about in
It's
college?
in college. Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we think about. I ultimately, um, I think whatever he ends up wanting to do, and I think he's expressed interest in like computers and medicine, and it's probably from my wife's influence as well.
Is your wife a doctor?
She's a doctor, yeah. So she's my hedge, she was my hedge in the startup world, stability and volatility. But I would say like just find those niches to go deep in. Like I think when I was at Berkeley, it was like there's so many smart people at Berkeley, and to some extent you do have to stand out.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to get these programs where they're only like admitting maybe like 10, 15 people at a time, you have to have something that makes you different. And what I found is that finding these like niche areas where you just go super deep, and it doesn't have to even be right. It doesn't have to be the most important thing in the world, but just something that's interesting enough for you to want to go deep into. That's where you can figure out, you learn how to go deep in something. And then eventually you could pivot into other areas, but just that ability to go deep is really important. And so even if I was to kind of fast forward to today at Microsoft, we care a lot about evals, like a lot. So when we build like an agent or like some type of AI solution, we think about what is the eval or metric we're going to go optimize against. And then we watch it like a hawk and we hill climb on it.
Can you give a very specific, are you allowed to give a specific example?
I am,
or an old one?
Yeah, maybe not too specific, but I can. It's just more like if you're solving a customer problem, like maybe I'll make up something like let's say it's like you're helping like support, like you want to help customer support, like improve it. You have an agent that can go and address a customer support need, do it faster, and then you deflect the ticket so it doesn't have to go to a human, which takes more time and it's more expensive and all these things. So you need your agent to be able to satisfy the request at a high enough level so that the user doesn't get, has DSAT or is dissatisfied and then says, hey, give me a human to talk to because the answer is terrible. So you want to lower that as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain metrics that you need to care about to go and think about, and then you have to tune your models and your data and everything to go and do that. And that metric and that hill climbing and that eval that you do, it doesn't just apply to like AI. It's anything. It's any research, I would argue, has some type of metric you care about that you need to go optimize against. And if you can go deep enough down that path and figure out how to improve it and hill climb it, you become an expert in that space. And just that by nature of being an expert in something, you can pivot that into other directions. So you don't have to be right. So when I started at Berkeley, my area of expertise that I think helped me for the Microsoft role was actually in computer networking, because I thought it was really interesting. And I had a book at home on computer networking. That was the reason why I chose it. It was completely arbitrary.
Yeah.
And I read that book during the winter break. I'm like, this is interesting. I'm like, what computer networking classes do we have at Berkeley? We had one. And at the time, it was a grad course taught by Von Suika, who was assistant professor at the time. And so I went and I took his, I asked him, can I join your class? I had none of the requirements for the class. And he goes, sure, you could take it.
Did you copy the chancellor?
I didn't. He was so chill about it. He's like, yeah, sure. You want to learn about networking? Go for it. So I took that class and I was learning from him, and like he's a genius. And I was like, wow, this guy's really good. Like the way he talked about abstraction, I still remember it to this day, like what he said in that class. And then in that class, you have to build a project. And I remember having to do some I was writing Tickle and like doing simulations of like what a good like a ad hoc networking protocol would be. And I was just writing this up and had to write a paper about it and everything. So then when I went to do the internship interviews, I had so much depth to talk about. I wasn't talking about I took CS61B and I learned Java. I was able to really go down the rabbit hole of a problem. I ended up not spending all my time in networking. I ended up moving up the stack and focusing on databases, and that took me into like AI and machine learning and search and those things. But by starting with something, it becomes easy to be an expert in something else.
I think it's super interesting that you say that, because there are two things that you, in case you all didn't get this, and I'm sure you did, but it's this ability to show passion for something. You were passionate about wanting that Microsoft job. And also this ability to show that you could be passionate about a topic also and go deep into it. And so it doesn't necessarily matter. Probably computer networking is much more interesting to Microsoft than, I don't know, something else, but that's interesting. You're talking about metrics, and I think we all think about metrics, and we're thinking about innovation. I'm just wondering if you've ever come across a surprisingly important metric, something that you didn't think would be of use, and it turned out to be like this red herring that was super important. It's a bad way to phrase that question.
No, I mean, metrics, I think once I got into AI and machine learning, you really care a lot about metrics, right? Because that's like what you're going to focus on, basically optimize against. And I think the part that I took for granted was actually not really, it's metrics, but it's not really like, mathematical optimization kind of stuff. It's really on the revenue side.
On the revenue side.
Yeah. So when I, like, for the most part, was really focused on like building cool tech. That was like, and I still have this problem to this day of like wanting to build just cool tech. But you really have to show respect to understanding the business model, understanding the like the revenue growth engine behind it, and those metrics too. Like there's real metrics behind that. Like even at my startup Infer, like we cared a lot about like, we looked at things like, you sort of have to take these business metrics and make it your own. Like there isn't like a one size fits all thing. Like you don't just look at ARR and things like that. Like you have to look at it with respect to your business. And so we would look at our funnel, right? We would look at like, our leads and all the way down to close won deals. But we can actually do much better than that if you really understand it. If you understand, okay, what's like a sales qualified lead? What's the rate of that converting into the next stage? If I know that and I know what that is, I can forecast that really well. And not only that, but I can actually compute like my CAC, and I can compute like how much it costs, customer acquisition costs.
Thank you.
But I can do it not based on like when the customers close. I can do it based on at the higher level of the funnel. So I can predict it faster.
Yeah.
So I was turning these metrics and making them more predictive, but I can see what was going to happen in my business, because a lot of these metrics in revenue that are kind of around your growth are really backwards looking metrics. Right, but if you can make them a bit predictive, you can really see the problems in your business really fast, and you can be able to like course correct. And so I think, but a lot of that came from the fact that I was doing a lot of those things on the tech side, and I was so the thing I've learned is like metrics are never really one size fits all. Like you really have to like truly apply it in all parts of your product and your business model.
So, starting with when you go to Infer, or when you start up Infer, can you just you were 13 years? Is it? Well, you don't have it on there, but I think it was like sound right?
It was a while. Yeah, I think we started the company in 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And then we got acquired in 2017.
Yeah.
And we stay along with the acquiring company and everything else.
Can you tell us what Infer did and kind of the process of starting it there and how innovative it was?
Yeah, so it was actually a very unconventional space, because up till then, everything I had done was in the consumer space. So I was working on consumer web search, like Google and Yahoo. And then what we did with Infer, and this is a little bit inspired based on the work that I had learned at Sutter Hill, was I decided to go after the enterprise. So the enterprise felt like a really greenfield opportunity.
Just in case, can you explain enterprise?
Yeah. So enterprise is like where you're building products and you're selling it to customers or companies.
Company is your customer, not.
Yeah. So if I build, some software to help improve sales, and I sell that to a company like, like IBM or Microsoft, and they buy it from me and they spend $50,000 a year, that's how it works. In the consumer side, it's a little bit different, right? In the consumer side, your end user is your consumer. So you're building these web apps. You're trying to get hundreds of millions of users using it. So at Yahoo, we were trying to improve the Yahoo homepage. So we use AI and machine learning to improve the click-through rates on the links. At Google, we're trying to improve the ranking of the search results, and that improves more usage on the website, which then in turn helps improve their ads business. So very different than enterprise, where you're building software directly for a customer, for a specific user in the company, and helping them be successful in their world. So we decided to go after enterprise because we saw a greenfield opportunity there. We in the consumer space, to this day, the best AI is in the consumer space. The best, big data management is done in the consumer space. The best user experiences and UI is in the consumer space. And there was a big gap, especially in 2010, in the enterprise software side. It looked like horrible. Like it looked like, old school 1995 software, like mainframe stuff, And so we're like, what if we just took our learnings from the consumer space and applied it to the enterprise? That was our thinking.
It's so elegant. It's so simple and so elegant.
Yeah, and these companies spend a lot of money, and the business model is a lot cleaner and more predictable in the enterprise space than it is in the consumer space. Right? So consumer space, like if you're building a startup in consumer space, it's sort of like you got to hit the lottery a little bit, right? Like it's really hard to get people's attention. So it's easy to tell after the fact. So if you build a web app and then people love it and then it gets millions of users, then it makes more sense from a VC perspective to go invest in that.
Yep.
But at the zero stage, it's like impossible to know if that idea is going to be good or not. But in the enterprise, it's different. There's actually a little bit of a formula you could do to make it a little bit more predictable, a little bit safer to do at early stage. So we're like, okay, let's go after the enterprise for all these reasons. We loved AI, so we said, okay, let's do AI for specific functions. So we decided to focus on sales and marketing, so to help companies get more customers and grow. We saw there was a lot of great data about their customers that were sitting in CRM systems like Salesforce, and literally no AI was being done on that data at the time. It was literally being used to do reporting to help a VP of sales know who to hire and fire. It was actually kind of depressing. Like people didn't want to spend time in the CRM system. It was basically, it's almost like a top-down type of thing to figure out who's not performing. So I'm like, oh, we got to do something better than that with this data. This data is pretty useful. And if we marry that with web data to get more signals about the customers, we build models, we probably do something interesting. And what we found is that we can actually predict things like that are very important for the business.
Or infer.
Right, or infer, yeah.
Yep.
So we did that, and it actually took off fairly quickly. So like our first few years, we're growing like our revenue by like 400%. That attracted some good interest. So we raised money from Andreessen Horowitz and Redpoint and a few others. And we grew the team to like 100 plus full-time heads in the Bay Area, recruiting talent out of Google and Facebook at the time. So like very competitive. So it was great. There's a lot of ups and, obviously you have a lot of scary moments as well, but it was a fun experience.
Can you, people always want to hear about those scary moments.
Scary moment.
Anything you can share with us?
I think
because you survived it.
I mean, you still have the scars like inside, like you feel it. There's
here, have some water.
I think there's kind of two parts. One is the accountability is on a whole different level, right? Like, and especially if you're like the founder, CEO of a startup, it's really on your shoulders to be making the right decisions, and you don't know if those decisions are the right ones. And you will make or break people's payroll. You have investors who are depending on you. You have customers depending on you. And you have to kind of have like a straight face with everybody a little bit. With your closest people on your team, you could be a little bit more open, which you should be, but like it's hard to do it for the rest. If you have 100 plus people in your company, you can't share all your horrors in your mind with them, or else you're going to have half your team leave. And so managing that is tricky. So like, a lot of sleepless nights, thinking about, are we doing the right thing here? Was it the right decision? Because it's some of these decisions are make or break for the whole company. But it's also exhilarating, like to have that kind of control. The agility we had was like amazing, which is something you definitely miss from startups. But yeah, I mean, it's an experience I wouldn't undo. I think I learned a lot and I grew a lot as a result of it.
You seem like an agile person in the way you approach things. You seem like someone who is incredibly adept at managing risk. Interestingly enough, like risk and hedging risk is important to you, and so you are able to, you are able to predict things. It's interesting to me that you decided to go back to Microsoft again, and I'm wondering if you can kind of talk about that decision and what you all are doing now on this pretty huge team and a topic, something that's going to impact all of us.
I think the big turning point for me to come back to Microsoft, I mean, it had been like 20 years since I was at Microsoft.
Yeah.
So I was, at Yahoo.
No more
and
Steve
Google. Ballmer. But one thing that was interesting, there's two things that happened. One was when I was building up Infer, we got reconnected with Microsoft. There was some partnership work that we were talking about with them. There was, they were actually a customer of us as well. Like they had acquired Yammer, which was using our product and paying for, using our services. So My former mentor at Yahoo was a person named Chi Lu. And he ended up going to Microsoft, and he was president at Microsoft. And he was running, some fairly large teams. And one of the people I think who was reporting to him at the time was Satya Nadella.
Such an Adela.
Yeah. And so he had connected me with him. And he was incredible, by the way. Like even back then, he was coming down to the Bay Area and meeting with startups, which is, not something a lot of folks were doing at the time, like because Microsoft's headquartered up in Redmond. And he was getting feedback and learning and listening. He was just starting up this thing called Azure, which ended up becoming, a huge success. And he was listening to startups, like meeting with startups, And so I had a chance to meet with him, and I was, very impressed. And we stayed connected, and we were, trying to find ways we could do more together with Microsoft that way. And then, so that was there. And then I think the other thing that happened was when ChatGPT came out. And I was like, this is like incredible. Like, and, I think I would have loved to have this when we had started Infer. So many of the things that we want to do, we just couldn't do technically.
Yeah.
Because there's just, the models weren't capable of doing it. And now it looks like this thing is there, and this is it. And so the question mark I had was, I needed to get back into this game again, right? And whether I go big company or small company was the question. And I think after you do a startup, and you get kind of like deep with VCs, like you think only in terms of like startups and VCs. And so there's a little bit of undoing you have to do to kind of do the homework to go back into a larger company. Because for the longest time, you've been like anti the establishment, you're like trying to take out the incumbents, And so it's a little bit weird to like rewire yourself that way. But I felt that the bigger companies like Microsoft were well positioned in this market for a variety of reasons. One is they had access to the customers. Right, so customers and their data and the trust there is very hard to do as a startup. If you're a startup and you have like 3 people and you're eating ramen and you go and you talk to a large company and they're going to trust you with all their data, it's really tough.
Yeah.
You can sometimes do it, and we did it in Infer, but man, I remember how painful that was too. And so one is like the leverage you have just with the customer base, but the other is like they also had a ton of GPUs. And you kind of need GPUs to do anything with AI. And so I felt like, because of those things, it felt like, and then also Satya, being the leader that he was and knowing him, and now at the time he was CEO, I felt like all those made sense to come back and to work there. So yeah.
I don't even know. Are you in Seattle?
No, I'm in the Bay Area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. All of a sudden I was like, wait, did you move up there?
It keeps me humble being here, and seeing folks on MacBooks, and like, it's good. It's like we have to know that there's this other world outside of Microsoft. Sometimes when you go up to Redmond and you see only Microsoft stuff, it's nice to kind of see everything else and, make sure that we're always open with everything and integrating with everything.
You are now working with forward deployed engineers. I kind of love that word, forward FDEs. I don't know if that's an industry word. I'm not familiar with it. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing and what the goal of your team is?
Yeah, so the concept of forward deployed engineering has become much more popular now. Palantir was the one who originally coined the term.
Okay.
And the basic idea of a forward deployed engineer is you effectively get someone who's like a really good software engineer, and you go to a customer and you ask them, like, what are your biggest business problems that you have? And you go, okay, and you go and you solve it. But you build a custom solution to solving it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really interesting because when Palantir did this, I think people were originally thinking, oh, this is like a consulting business, right? So the margins aren't going to be that great. It's going to be very expensive. It's going to be very difficult to scale, all those things. And what Palantir has shown is that you can actually scale it. Their margins are not of one that you would see a consulting firm have. They are comparable to a software company.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is when you bring really good talent and they do these problems, they don't like to repeat the same custom solution twice. So they end up naturally building solutions that are repeatable. They end up building platforms and infrastructure to make these things scale for the next customer. But this is great for both sides because the customer gets a solution that solves their problem as deeply as possible. And then we also are able to kind of build leverage by being able to scale it. And the other thing that has helped with the scalability is the fact that we have these coding agents. Like they are incredible. Claude Code and like GitHub Copilot CLI. Like you can do amazing things to make custom software scalable. So that's what our team does. We go to these companies and we ask them what their biggest business problem is, and we build these agents, these AI agents that go solve it, and we build the very best evals. We'll sometimes even fine-tune models for the customer. We do whatever it takes to solve that problem as best as possible. And we can actually scale it with all those infrastructure bits that we're building and using, things like Cloud Code and GitHub Copilot CLI. So,
I don't know this for sure, but I have this feeling that people love working for you. What do you think?
Well, it's a hard one to answer. I mean, I think, it's very mutual, I would say. Like the people that I get to work with are people I want to work with.
Yeah.
So I think, so I think of it as like, who are people I can learn from?
Yeah.
Who are people I want to hang out all the time with? And hopefully they reciprocate and they don't leave, and good things happen. So
I'm asking this also partially because you said, if you're a software engineer, you come in and do this. Well, not everybody in this room is going to be or is a software engineer. And I'm curious, if someone is not a software engineer, how could they stand out to you and I mean, how could they possibly approach some of the jobs that you have? Is there a way?
I think what a software engineer means is being questioned. So if I look at our team, and we tend to be like a very forward-looking team at Microsoft,
Mm-hmm.
we have designers committing PRs. My product manager commits PRs. Like that probably wouldn't have been the case a year ago. Those folks are not like classically trained in computer science or software engineering, but they have something to bring to the table, which is that they have taste. So like, for example, when we had our designers, like our designers are amazing, and they think a lot about the human problem. They think about polish. They think about all these things. And they had to work with our engineering teams to be able to modify the product and how it looks. Just that dependency on an engineering team to go implement those changes, that created like a natural filter over all the ideas that design has. So then when we were able to give them things like GitHub Copilot CLI, these coding agents, and we gave them access to the code base, and they can actually go and make those modifications. Now, obviously, code reviews become really important in this. So engineers still own code reviews, but the fact that they can go and iterate directly, we started seeing our products improve dramatically. Like there's so many ideas that just don't even get brought up because of all the extra latency and round trips you have to do when you rely on another team to go do it completely.
Mm-hmm.
So when you empower people to be able to go directly in and be able to do things, I think that's incredible. And so I think these like coding agents are not just for software people. Anyone can be using this stuff. I mean, if you look at even stuff like OpenClaw, or you look at, and there's gonna be many others, CoWork and whatever else. Effectively, these are coding agents behind the scenes that have been sort of built for the masses, if you will. And I think there's only gonna be more and more work being done on that part. So whether you like it or not, you're writing software. I mean,
in what you're doing right now, actually, how big is your team?
Yeah, we can't comment on team size.
Oh, you can't?
Yeah.
Can we do a bigger than 200?
It's a good size team, I'll say.
So 1,000?
Yeah, it's
maybe. I'm just curious. I mean, it's not a smaller company. It's like basically, I assume it's bigger than your startup.
Yes. So
okay, that's all.
So it depends. So like for our product group teams that I was managing, for sure, like those are much larger. But there's also parts where we want to be agile like a startup. So we can actually have small teams that go and own things and go deep, and you can have like 10, 20 person teams do a credible amount of work. And you see this happening not just with our group, but like if you look at companies like OpenAI or Anthropic, very small teams doing incredible amounts of work that's affecting like hundreds of millions of users. And so because these coding agents give them so much leverage now, that it actually makes sense in some ways to have tighter teams with more accountability.
So, always when you're working in a larger company, you're very goal driven, you have the official goals, your missions. Do you have any unofficial mission, something that you would like your team to do?
I mean, a lot of what we do it's not really in our goals. We might have goals around like, we got to make these customers successful. We got to improve these metrics. We got to have this number of customer deployments. Those are like top level kind of KPIs. But if you have a really strong team, and we keep our bar very high for talent, the best part of that is that there's a non-linearity you get from that. Like they don't just focus on the hitting the goals and check boxing. They're thinking about innovation. They're thinking about, oh, why don't we do things this way? Why don't we build a platform that does this? And no one told them to go do it. And it ends up creating this huge compounding effect that affects the team, that improves our output dramatically. And so we give rope to the team as much as possible to go and innovate.
Yeah.
So you can't be overly strict on your goals, but I think encouraging them to think this way, I think, is the best thing you can do as a leader. Is just let them, basically cook. Let them figure it out.
I think that you're inherently are a teacher. I don't know. I can't, Pan, I'm sorry. I don't remember if you said this in your introduction or not, but Vic was part of a hugely successful class with Dan Garcia.
Joey Gonzalez.
Joey Gonzalez. Sorry. It's terrible. Hopefully I can edit that. With Joey Gonzalez, sorry, on AI. And I think you're a great teacher. And I thought it was interesting. I pulled a chart that I think is in here. Let me look at it. That I thought was kind of interesting because it compares. Let me just do something. Then and now, kind of some thoughts that you had. I guess I've looked at podcasts that you had and one that you had recently, and just like what your thoughts are overall for takeaways. The timing for startups, this was 10 years ago. You wrote, timing is now for startups. You probably should read this, but optimize for customer champions. You were definitely talking about like bigger companies are constantly boiling the ocean. Don't do that. You are the sales channel, have advisors as enterprise experts. Does this sound like you from 2013, over 10 years ago?
It does. It's funny though. You see the juxtaposition from 2013 to 10 years later, where I start talking about big companies being the place to be versus startups.
But you're agile. You look at stuff and what's happening. Can you talk about just 3 years ago, what did you say?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it's in line with what I was mentioning before. There is like incredible amounts of infrastructure that's needed to kind of build these AI solutions. It doesn't mean that startups can't exist. It's just that your idea better be good. I think the bar for startups, if you're an AI startup, is considerably high. And so I think this is all still pretty fair. But yeah, you do have to be agile a little bit. It's different times. Like in 2013, when there weren't that many AI startups, or weren't that many enterprise companies, there's more white space. I think now, like, you hear about like 10 new startups every week. And so there's a lot more noise you got to compete with.
Something I can really resonates with me is this idea of building community, not just technology. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, it's important. So I think a lot of times, like, it's very easy to believe that output is based on the work that you build, especially code or some type of product. And I think in actuality, like, you have to look at it based on like the people that you're connecting with along that journey, and constantly reconnecting with. I think a lot of my career, to be honest, like it sounds like it's very linear, and it really wasn't. It was me just trying to follow good people. And when you follow good people, they tend to know good people, and you get to know them. And like, for example, like Microsoft internship was the only one I did where I didn't really do it because there was a person I was trying to follow. It was really trying to get my foot in the door at a big, important software company. But then, when I went to Google, there was a person named Vibhu Mittal who I really liked, and I got to know him. We're still colleagues to this day. We connect and connect, but that was a long time ago, and he was my mentor at Google. And then when I went to Microsoft Research, the reason why I went to Microsoft Research was that Jim Gray was there. And Jim Gray, I don't know if you guys know, he was like the first PhD in computer science from Berkeley. He won the Turing Award. He invented transactions.
Basically the Nobel Prize of computers.
Yeah, he invented transactions, which is a big deal. So like the ATM machines work, because of him. And I went to go and I wanted to work with him. I wasn't really thinking about it. If he was at some other facility, I would have worked with him still, or tried to work with him still. And so, and I got to work with him, which was like, a huge honor. And then when I went to Yahoo, I was able to work for someone named Raghu Ramakrishnan, who I get to work with again because he's at Microsoft. So we're still, colleagues to this day. And, I try to follow people versus brand. But the nice thing is if you follow good people, they tend to be at good brands, right?
Yeah.
And so you sort of get that for free. But people is the most important piece. And especially if you do a startup.
Yeah.
It is a very lonely thing to do. And you need a lot of advice and guidance from people who've done it, like real operators. And so our VCs, almost all of our VCs were people who had done it or had operated at a very high level in some type of company, or had done so many of these tech companies before that, they had so much travel knowledge. And I learned so much from them. Just even this past week, I had something that came up. And so I emailed my investors for advice.
Huh.
And, they responded back in, 24 hours. I got these sage advice. And so to continually be able to learn from them, I think is really important.
It's interesting. Asking for help, asking for advice is actually a power move. It doesn't show like you don't know something. It's actually the opposite. I think that people don't realize that always.
Yeah, I've never had a problem asking for help. I think I need a lot of help with a lot of things I'm looking at. These problems are really hard. If I went in and I had ego and thought I knew everything, I think I'd be doing great disservice to my team and what we're trying to accomplish. A lot of our leadership meetings that we do within our team, I try to spend a lot of time just trying to understand what they think, as opposed to it being this top down here's X, Y, and Z we gotta do. Yeah, there's some of that you gotta do, but it should be a collaboration. And it should really be hey, what do you think? And it's not just asking for checking the boxes, but really to try to synthesize all the ideas, and you're sort of curating ideas. Because if you could do that and it makes them feel like it was their idea, it ends up being built better, versus it being something you pass on saying you gotta do this or else. And I think we try to be very mindful of that.
That's why I think people like to work with you or work for you. Really, it kind of builds, it has to do with that. I think this is a great time right now to pass it on to the students. Also, for you all to ask questions. Bobby, do you have a mic? And then Pan, can you take the other mic, which is over there, and help pass it around, if you don't mind? You've seen Bobby and Claire's not feeling well today. Do it, and so I will let you all. We'll do this as quickly as possible because we have about a half an hour for questions, and then I'll post our link. But any questions to start with? Pan, go ahead, run over there. Now you can see, or actually, would you mind? I just saw somebody toward the back before Jolie, and then we'll go that. And if you could just introduce yourself, and then we can pass it to Jolie.
Thank you so much. I'm Ashley. Thanks so much for coming. First of all, very funny you mentioned Vibhu, because I had the opportunity to meet him in an ed tech context, and also very similarly, he had these longtime friends that ended up being super helpful. So I was really interested in your point about agile teams and building small teams. First of all, ideal team size in your opinion for those small teams? And second of all, how do you ensure that there's cohesion across those small teams and they're not siloed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on the scope of the project a little bit, but I think you want to start as small as you can. I would say, especially with all the stuff that's happening with these coding agents, I think you can actually afford to do that, and then add in more people as you go. It doesn't have to be a hard number per se, but I think the magic number that we've seen for really important projects can be as low as 7 people if they're really good. And the talent bar should be really high there. And I think the other thing that helps is that each person sort of can't just be a specialized role. They should be able to rotate. They should all have taste. They should all be able to do some design, front end, back end, everything. Product skills, then you can get away with a smaller team and you can get going really quickly. We tend to not have too many small islands and they have to all kind of communicate. They tend to own enough where they don't need to depend on other groups to go do what they need to do. And I think a place where the way we kind of make connection points between teams, it's almost like how we do it with agents, right? You build these MCP servers and you build these tools and they call it, and then now all of a sudden Cloud Code and GitHub Copilot say, I can do this now. And it doesn't have to require changing, how Cloud Code works or something. So we try to do a similar thing where you're sort of building interfaces between groups and they can kind of work together through APIs literally, and that ends up being rather nice because you can then let the models, like a lot of our work is AI. So like we kind of let the models do the work to figure out how to work with these different tools and like combine things together and orchestrate versus like teams doing it, which is where you can have like bottlenecks and like that should be mine, that, or is that yours? That just kind of goes around. Let the model decide. So.
Vic, maybe everybody knows it's like the other person who uses taste all the time is the current CEO of Y Combinator, Gary Tan. Sorry. Phew. Can you describe what you mean by taste?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that also varies based on the product, but I would say like it's just caring a lot.
Caring,
like,
CARING.
Yes, like caring a lot about the quality, like caring a lot about the finish, caring a lot about the success metrics. It really comes to that. Like, and not everyone has it. Like a lot of times people can't see it all, right? They see a piece of it or they get really enamored with the tech. They only want to focus on building the database. But like really having the taste to think about, is this good enough to ship for an end user, and what that criteria should be is really important. And so for us, like we care a lot about, for our agents, that the evals matter, like how well it can do on the metric, but we care about polish of the user experience, the command center experience, all those things matter. And so those decisions tend to go to those people who have that taste. And not everyone has an equal amount of taste, so like, but they're good in other ways. They make up for it because they're just so technical on this piece or whatever. So we work with what we have, but you know, it's something you I think see a lot in product roles and design roles.
Yeah.
But if you have that ability and you're also someone who's in the engineering stack and could go deep, that's a pretty dangerous combination, you know? And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage that.
Thank you. I think we had a question on this side. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. I'm Rita. I'm a bioengineer. Thank you for your talk. It really sounds like you really know how to manage teams. And so I have a question on how do you make sure that people grasp onto AI tools easily? Like you said that even a designer can do a PR. And I'm currently working with scientists and I noticed they don't use AI tools as much as our generation does. Because it feels like overwhelming. So do you have any advice on that? And how do you make sure that all your team is up to date with everything that's happening right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for our team, there's a few ways. One is we do actually look at our KPIs. Like we have dashboards and metrics. So I can literally see how much coding agent usage is happening by person on our team. That's always nice. And so, and I tell the team that we care about this a lot. Like we want to see this, and we want to lead Microsoft in this regard because we think, you know, this is important. It's the future. It drives up our efficiency and so on. And the other piece is you do have to build some infrastructure to enable the designers or enable people like that to use it. So in the case, like for our designers, it's actually really hard for them to get into our repos and like go and get access and like be able to like create a branch. Like it gets pretty nasty. And so what we did was, and even setting up your dev environment is like a pain, you know? So like what we did is we end up using GitHub code spaces. We can actually set up the environment automatically. The user can just go in there, log in, and then be able not have to worry about their dev environment and setting that up. And then they can just talk to the coding agent, which is already there, and they can start giving it prompts, and they can tweak the existing apps that are already in the repo, and then they can see how that looks. And in a code space, you can actually create a link that you can publish, that you can share with other people on the team, and they can go and see the work without having to do any branches or anything else. So that brought down the barrier to entry, if you will. But we had to kind of think about that. We had to kind of problem solve around it. And that took our engineers to get involved and document it out and so on. But that collaboration is really important. That wasn't backwards work. That ended up being so valuable because now like our product just looks so much better after we did that. Like it was a night and day difference once design was able to touch the code base. And so we're like, everyone should be touching this, product management, everyone. You know, if they have a customer meeting, you know, we could take the meeting transcript from Teams and we can actually go and turn that into a spec and start building right away. Like, why even wait for that meeting to happen with the PM talking to engineers? That's too late. That takes like a day or two to schedule, and then and the PM has to regurgitate everything they heard in the meeting anyways. It's like wasted time. That coding agent should be running all day. You know, that's what we want. Like, it's just like, because it's like amazing what you can do with these tools, and they're just getting better and better and better. So it's and we've also seen in our team, like initially, like when we looked at the adoption rate, and I can't give numbers, but the adoption rate was fairly high for our team. But the nice thing is when you start embracing these tools, you end up building more tooling around it to make it more useful. And if you start generating code with AI, once you started generating code with AI, then the easiest way to maintain and update that code is with AI. Like the hardest thing to do is to take AI generated code and then have humans go and like add to it. You're better off just continue. So your usage of the coding agents actually continues to climb. You can't be like, I would argue, you can't be 40%, 50% lines of code with a coding agent. You will either be like 80% to 100%, or you're like 10%, 20% because maybe your code base is legacy and has some other issues that you can't really use it for.
Thank you.
Hi, I think your experience both on the entrepreneurship, the startup and the big giant company really inspired me. And I just feel like if I want to start the entrepreneurship with a startup compared to the big giant company, it's really different. So startup can be fail fast, iterate fast, and they may lack of enough resource. And yeah, my question is, if you want to start an entrepreneurship in a big giant company, it may have like a organization hierarchy structures. You may need to have multiple communication layers. You need to deal with really conflict.
And your question is?
And my question is, if you want to fail fast, iterate fast, how do you deal with this kind of thing, like the big giant organization conflicts, the communication layers, and ownership layers in a hierarchy organizations?
Yeah, it was something I thought about a lot when the most jarring thing you can do is go from Infer to Microsoft. It was like I would have to kind of try to reorient myself around how big companies operate. I think the key thing though is you also have to have a lot of empathy for why large companies operate that way. It's not all bad. Like there's a reason why you have processes and structures and things like that, because those things don't fly when you're running with like Fortune 500 companies and you got security and you got things like that you don't have to deal with, or it's fast and loose in a startup. And so I think going in, instead of it being like, hey, how do I like disrupt this whole space, have empathy to understand why they have that in the first place and try to learn from that. Like this is a company that's been around for 50 years and has been successful on the top of their game. Like what can I do to learn from that? And can I combine my ability to iterate with that? And that's how I try to approach it, at least. And I've been amazed by how much support I've gotten from Microsoft to go do this, to be able to do some fairly unconventional things in terms of how we use our tools, like the ability to use open stacks, even things that are outside the Microsoft stack, to be able to operate teams, whether they're large or even tiny teams, and be able to give them control to go do stuff. There's a lot more acceptance, I think, when you are finding middle ground with it versus like trying to treat it as like you're a different culture, if that makes sense. I would try to embrace it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Who's next?
Hi. Sorry.
Oh, can you raise your
Hi,
hand?
can you hear me? Okay. Hi, thank you so much for coming today. When you're describing your journey, you're talking about how, I think you're talking about your experience at Infer, and you're describing how when you have an idea at zero, there's no way of telling whether it's going to be a success or not, but when that product or that idea is for an enterprise, there's like kind of a formula for figuring out whether or not it's going to be successful. Could you elaborate a little bit more about that and what that formula entails?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like an actual formula, but it's it's a little bit easier to prove value in the enterprise. So one thing you can do is you can obviously look at the team. You can look at the market size, right? You can find, okay, the space that you're going after, are there incumbents in that space that have done well? Are there startups in that space? What are their valuations at? So you can look at all those things. Those are always important. But then you can also you can do kind of these MVP style projects. You could even get enterprise customers to commit capital to the idea before you even build it. And so you're getting effectively customer references. If a customer is willing to spend $50,000, $100,000 for an idea that you haven't even built yet, and you've done that like 10 times over, that's pretty good signal, especially if it's in a big market. That's much harder to do in the consumer space, right? If I go and I convince 10 of you to spend $1 on my app, maybe that works at 100 million users. That doesn't mean nothing. I didn't improve anything there. So the bar for consumer is just much higher. It's much harder, but it's fun if you could pull it off. But the competition's fierce. Attention is hard. Enterprise, you can do things that are a little bit like this, where you can sort of put a business model around it, and make sense of it. That's why I went into it. It kind of de-risked it, and it felt like a big opportunity. I also wanted to learn a lot about the enterprise. I felt like I spent a lot of time in the consumer, and I actually really like the enterprise a lot. I think I even like the enterprise more than I did in the consumer space, because there's something nice about being able to go and talk to a customer directly. I talk to a CIO of a major company and learn about their problems and go deep with them and build that relationship with them that you don't really get as much when you're in the consumer space, because everyone's a number in the consumer space when you're at scale, right? It's I moved 50 million to 55. It's cool. The numbers are big, but that individual, it's very hard for me to attach myself to sometimes in the consumer space.
Thank you.
Sorry, pass that mic around. I actually can't believe it. We just need a little more diversity. Can we ask a guy to ask a question? Can't believe I'm saying that. I never do, and then we'll go for it.
Thank you. Hi, Vic. Yeah, I'm humble, and currently I'm a master student in engineering school, and I have a question. As many frontier labs are moving into productivity tools like cloud, making many tools and agents, especially coding agents. So I'm really curious how Microsoft can sustain its advantages in this area and also keep it, as the first choice for the enterprise. Yeah, this is my question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's it's a good question. So, there's still many things that matter, that you have to wrap around if you're using a coding agent, right, with tools and so on. A lot of the best applications for it tend to be these business workflows, these business processes, a lot of which are owned by Microsoft, right, with the customer. And so, we're definitely not just sitting idly by. We're also leveraging these tools and these agents to kind of reimagine these processes. There's also a good amount of data that you have to have these agents operate over. That data needs governance, security. It's already sitting in Azure. It's already sitting in our instance. So you typically don't want to move data out. That's the big challenge for a lot of these other frontier labs, is that they have the model, but they don't really have a lot of the enterprise data and workflows. In order for them to work with their models, they need to move the data closer to their model. And that migration story is tricky for a lot of companies for a lot of reasons. You're almost giving your confidential IP away, and there's all these security things and so on that happen. There's also places where applications still matter, right? You look at something like Excel, you look at Word, you look at Teams, where there's collaboration that's happening. In this new world, effectively what's going to happen, it's what we see in software, right? Where you have a developer who has now become an engineering manager, but an engineering manager of coding agents. So they have 20 coding agents running in parallel, running down those token meters. And that's what's going to happen for every other function of the enterprise, right? You're going to see that for sales leaders. You're going to see that for marketing folks. You're going to see that for finance people. They're going to do effectively the same thing. And there are certain experiences where that makes sense to go and see that. And it's not going to be a command line. It's probably going to be something that looks like M365, like Office, or within that app. And that's what we're focusing and investing on. And also the nice thing too is with all these coding agents, all the code that's getting generated all ends up in GitHub, all ends up in repos, which Microsoft owns too. So there's a lot of places where we can play on the stack, but it's something we're watching closely and we're involved in and building on versus, letting it be on the sidelines and watching. We're very much involved in that process as well.
Who has the mic?
I have the mic.
All right.
So I have a question. It is, should startup founders go into big company or corporate job before doing their own startups?
So I would say that if you don't have to, I did, but I didn't have the idea or the team. And I would say that at the time. And I would say that if you're going to do a startup and not go to a big company or some company that's larger, then your idea better be really good. Like it has to be an idea that like you lose sleep on. And you feel like you're the only one in the world who can actually put this to life. And if you don't put this to life, you're literally not going to get enough sleep and go to the hospital. It's got to be that good. Don't do it for the glitz. Don't do it just to be a founder. You know, I was at there was some incubator lab. I'm not going to say the name. And I was like, there was so many startup founders there. And, one of them had just started a company. And then, that person was like complaining about the snacks that was in the incubator. He's like, why do we have these snacks? We should have these bars. We should have this. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is not, the startup mode. Like the startup mode has nothing to do with that. You don't care about those things. It's not a big party of a whole bunch of people coming together to go and like socialize. It's like it's a big problem that you're trying to solve for. And so the bar should be really high, and it should be done with people that you care about. If you check those boxes, do it, because you're not gonna get sleep anyways, so you might as well.
Thank you.
Down here.
Hi, Vic. So thank you so much for sharing about your career in tech and how like your entire journey. So my name is Navitra, and I'm a junior studying computer science, similar to you. And my question is on finding a niche that you want to go deep into. So you mentioned how initially you started off with like doing computer networks, and then afterwards you moved up learning about databases and AI. So for me, like I'm currently like taking a bunch of upper division classes because I'm still exploring which niche I want to go into. So I'm doing machine learning, computer security, and databases, all pretty different. And so I was wondering, what advice would you have for me in helping, like in how I could potentially find my niche?
I mean, it sounds like you're already doing it. I mean, you're basically exposing yourself to a variety of special areas that are more specialized. And I think as a part of those, hopefully there's projects you build in those that you can go deeper on and talk about. And then, I would probably go a little bit deeper on just one of them that you like the most, and again, I think a lot of people that I've talked to, and I look at a lot of folks who graduated with me, they try to find the perfect area, like the perfect thing that they love, and they have a hard time finding that. Like what's that one thing I want to go deep in? They try to be really optimal. There is no optimal decision. If you do that, you're going to have paralysis in your decision making. It's very hard to figure out an area, especially you have imperfect information. And the only way you'll know if you like it or not is if you go deep. So go deep and don't be afraid to backtrack, and you have so much time too. The worst thing you do is just be overgeneralist. And that's like a lot of people. Like you come out of college, and I think, and this is a different point, but like if you're coming to like our team, for example, you want to interview for our team. And I would say this is probably true for a lot of the top companies. I don't think it's any more about, okay, I get into a top university like Berkeley, I do all my classes, I get good grades, I am now somehow entitled for a job, for like an engineering role or whatever it might be. I don't think that works in this market. I think instead, I would think about if you're going to a company and you want to pitch them to hire you, then treat it like you're raising money for your startup. Treat it as if you want the company to acquire you. Like you as an individual are a company. Would you go in and say I took CS61B? Like, no, right? It would be a totally different like talk track. But that's not how a lot of the people think about it. But you got to bring value, right? You got to bring value on the table because now the bar is higher, right? I look at some of these numbers, from MIT and others, and like the number of students that haven't received jobs at a certain point was at it was a very high rate compared to what it was before. And that's not just for MIT, that's across, the spectrum. And so I think you got to naturally raise your bar. And the nice thing is you can. I mean, you have access to tools that I wish I could have had at your age. I mean, you can learn about literally anything. You can go deep on literally anything. And so, I would just say, go do it. There's like no risk to it. The risk is not going deep.
Very quick follow-up, but how many niches have you jumped throughout your career?
A lot.
Yeah. I'm going to let you talk later about that if you want to follow up. Let's get some questions in the middle. We've gotten a lot on the sides, or maybe in the back row. I don't know.
Hello, my name's Nipun. And I really loved how you said to like follow good people, and was wondering what your advice would be on going to a startup or an enterprise and finding good mentorship. Yeah, what would your advice be on that?
So, I think it's a good question. I think there's two things. One is sometimes there's just events or talks that happen inside the company. You should just go and immerse yourself in those and hear from these folks who are experts in areas. And if there's things that click, their style clicks, go ping them and email them afterwards and try to connect with them. And the other thing I used to do too, I still do to this day, once you get inside a company, you get access to the org chart. And I spent a lot of time looking at the org chart trying to figure out who does what. And, it's kind of like the internal LinkedIn, if you will. And, and you can find, okay, what areas am I interested in? Who are the people who are in those areas? And, there's no harm or foul to go reach out to them, especially if you're all in the same like corp network and you have the same domain. You have a higher chance of getting a response than you did if you were outside the company. So leverage that to your advantage and try to find people there. And the other thing too is I wouldn't make it so much about like when you meet with them, like, hey, telling them, hey, be my mentor. That's a very heavy ask, and especially if they're people who are very busy. But I think it's just like try to come in with something that is useful for them, like some type of insight or some type of follow-up question on something they had brought up in their talk or in their meeting or whatever else. And you don't have to go to the top, right? Like sometimes the best mentors are people who might just be like the same level, a peer or a manager. It doesn't have to be 10 levels up in the org chart. And you can get a lot of more iterations with them and learn with them and grow with them. And they have a network and they can connect you to people too as well. So
I think we have time for one question, but before we take that question, I want to let you all know that we're going to put 2 codes up today. One is a code that I had sent an email on for you all to submit a project to the Microsoft team. And if you have a hard time with what we're putting up here, because it requires Microsoft, I think an email or access, I have another one for you. You can use either one. There's a Google Doc code, QR code, and one that goes directly to Microsoft. And then in addition to that, I want you all to know that there is also a code word for later on. So know that. You'll see that in just a second. Let's go with our last question for tonight.
Hi, Wick. Here.
Okay.
Thanks for the talk. My name is Mirsad. And I wanted to ask, you're working in AI and enterprise, which is a pretty popular place for startups. And I wanted to ask, what do you think Microsoft have that those startups lack? And what do you think those startups have that Microsoft lacks in order to win this race? Basically, probably one of the hottest spaces for startups.
yeah, I probably touched on a lot of this, and I think in the earlier question too, like in terms of assets that Microsoft has. I think just in terms of like data, the business workflows, those already existing inside the Microsoft tenant is hugely valuable. So we don't have to move data around. We can bring AI to it, and so on. So I think there's a lot of places where we can play there. I think the tricky part is actually, startups are innovating so quickly, but it's not just us, but like even startups are having a hard time keeping up with everything that's happening in the AI space. There's like a new model literally every week, and it almost changes the assumptions of how you built your stuff maybe previously. So we're all trying to cope in this world of like constant model innovation that's happening. But we have to step up our game to be able to innovate rapidly as well and quickly, and we are, and we're making those, like especially in our team, for example, like we're fairly agile. We move quickly. Like for a lot of our customers that we deploy a solution with them in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's really fast. It's not like the traditional 6-month, 12-month type of process. We have to in order to move quickly. And also, if you ship software in like 6 months or 12 months, that software that you built is basically outdated by the time it ships, right? If you think that way, because of all the innovations that are happening in the models, You just have to quickly ship. So I think there's a lot we can learn from startups. We also think it's not a zero-sum game between us and startups, right? We think there's a lot of opportunity to help startups and build a platform for startups as well, right? If we can turn our stuff into infrastructure and APIs, we have these IQ platforms that we're building, we can actually allow startups to innovate and then build on top of our stack. And that helps both sides, right? Because startups struggle with distribution, gaining data access, security, everything else. These are things that are first class for Microsoft. We can make available to them. So I think it's actually a combination where we can all kind of grow the pie together, but we have to keep up with all the innovations that are happening so that we make sure that all of our tooling works with all the latest and greatest advances that are happening on the modeling side. But it is a pretty incredible time, I think, for us, but also for you all. I mean, you are all like students here, and then around you is this like crazy AI revolution that's happening, and you're getting to live through that, and all this is first class for you. You don't have to undo all these things that I have to unlearn. You know, you're learning this as you go, which I think is pretty incredible, and I think that makes you a valuable player in the space if you can go deep and leverage it. So I'm excited to see all the great work you guys do, and hopefully we can be a part of that, and Microsoft can be helpful in that.
Before we totally end and give you a hand, you are the consummate teacher because you have an assignment for us, right? Do you know that?
Yes.
So let me just zip over to that assignment. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do when we interview a candidate is, and that ends up being really important, is that, you know, we do like 4 something rounds of interviews that are technical, and then after we do that, then we ask the candidate to present their work, anything they've done that's gone deep, you know, especially if there's a metric or an eval at the end of it, and present it to our team, our whole team. And they get to, you know, talk to us and share their work and their passion with us. And then we do an AMA afterwards where our team basically asks questions. And I kid you not, like, I could just look at that meeting alone and I know exactly if we should hire that person or not. Because if you think about it, if you join a company, what do? Right? You end up, you know, building things, going deep, sharing your work with the team and doing meetings and presenting it is very similar to what you would actually do in practice. And it kind of tests the full set of skills that a person has to have. You know, the gumption, the passion, the speaking ability, communications, the depth, the metrics, the whole story comes together. And I usually can tell from like even 5 minutes into the talk if the person should be a hire or not, just based on that. And so one thought was, well, what if we kind of put this back on you all? Like maybe if you guys have work that you've done that you're proud of, you know, record it, you know, do like a quick like 5 minute, you know, 10-minute video, and feel free to shoot it to us and we'll take a look at it in terms of opportunities with our team or somewhere in Microsoft.
It's an exceptional opportunity. And if you have any issues accessing this QR code, it's also an announcement from Sunday, and I'll go ahead and send it this evening as well. It is an exceptional opportunity to listen to you. Thank you, Vik, so much for joining us. A huge round of applause.
Thank you.